Yeah, we're here talking about Narcissus, which is my new novella, and that's being released May 2nd from Shortwave Publishing. Essentially, it's about four young Americans that are vacationing in Mykonos, Greece, and they kind of catch wind of a local legend or a suspicion that the reflecting pool by which the demigod Narcissus had once wasted away in self obsession. And so they think they know the location to this. Something horrific's happened years prior in relation to this spot, and they say, "Hey, let's go check it out." Well, they find it, and some not so great things happen to them. As a result, they come to find their reflections have been possessed. So, throughout the book, they're kind of being pursued by their own reflections. How long can one person survive without looking at their own reflection? It's quite impossible. But anything that can reflect your image, through that reflection, your reflection can get you.
I'm going to start out. Usually I don't really go into, I'm not a reviewer anymore. I used to review books. I used to say this worked well, this didn't work well. I don't really like to do that anymore. I really just want to talk about books that I want to talk about. And so you being here means I enjoyed this book. So I'll start out by saying when I first heard about it on like Twitter and stuff, the synopsis or whatever I was reading about it, I was like, ooh, this is like, it hooked me in quickly. And that cover is beautiful. So, yeah. Can we start out by talking about the cover? Because it is gorgeous.
Yeah. So Alan, who owns Shortwave, Alan Lestufka, hopefully I didn't butcher his name too much there. But he was a graphic designer. He still is, has been for many years. So, he takes a lot of pride in the artwork that goes into his publications and everything through Shortwave and the formatting and everything. So that's kind of the forte of his position. He's expressed how much he loves that. And you can really tell through the design work he does. And that's one thing that really drew me to Shortwave initially. I do judge a book by its cover. In many cases, it makes all the difference. It's really eye grabbing and does its job quite well. All the stuff he puts out. So I was really pleased when he first presented that, and I thought he really captured the whole essence of the book. And that was the original kind of draft. It was really. When he first reached out to me, he showed me that as a part of that initial email. Hey, I'd love to acquire this book, if you're interested. And by the way, as I was reading it, I did this mock-up. I was like, well, that's really awesome. And that was a good sign to me that he just took the initiative to go ahead and do that. It showed he was really invested in it already right off the bat. And that just spoke volumes to me. So, so I love it. Coloring and everything of it. It's really cool. So it's got a lot of I'm glad.
Well, it's two thoughts about that. First of all, if he went that far just before even like acquiring the book, you're probably working with someone who believes in the project. So that's got to be really comforting.
Yes, absolutely.
And then, man, it's just really evocative, and it's like, I don't think it's easy all the time for a story to have like a single image that could be so representative of it. So sure. I think that this really, really hits the nail on the head.
Yeah, absolutely.
So great, because like I think a lot of promotion now, because it used to be like, oh, you're looking at Amazon, you're looking at a tiny little thumbnail and you can't see what's going on. But I think a lot of promotion now is very visual with like TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that. So having an evocative cover, a cover that like makes you stop and like think what's going on here has got to be really helpful.
Yes, absolutely. And I think definitely the coloring he used, sort of that hot pinkish color, like you just mentioned, in these small thumbnails, that are scrolling by on the screen, it kind of grabs your eye. The coloring means everything. And from a marketing perspective, it makes sense, the whole design, coloring, everything. So yeah, it works. Yeah. I'm happy with it.
It's a great start. I figured it made sense to start about like the thing that got me into it, like initially was looking at that cover. Cause it's like, it's even one of those books, and maybe I'm just like I really enjoyed it so much that I'm feeling, kind of like high on this book, but like I could see like just wanting it for the cover and not being as interested in it. Like I just want to display this somewhere. So,
Like, yeah,
Um,
scrap the inside. No, it's I know what you mean. I like it.
yeah, it's good. It's very good. I'm looking forward to. I ordered one, so I'm looking forward to having it. Usually, like if I get a print copy before I'm talking to the author, it'll be sitting up here somewhere, so it's like lingering in the background.
Yeah,
So, but I'm looking forward to when mine arrives.
cool.
Um, the title, I got corrected by my girlfriend that I was saying it wrong. So, can I hear you say the title?
Narcissus.
Okay, cool. I was saying it wrong. I was emphasizing the wrong thing. So, what was the inspiration for this story? Because obviously it ties into like real mythology and stuff, but like adapted into a modern day story. So where did this come from?
Yeah, so with any story, anything I write, I try to come up with something completely original that I've never come across before. And I was thinking, the horror world needs sort of a new antagonist, something completely original and different. And I'm toying around with ideas, and I'm in the car driving, and Marilyn Manson comes on the radio. His song "Deep Six." So and I kind of hate to even bring this guy up with all the allegations against him and everything, but there was a line in the song. It said, "You want to know what Zeus said to Narcissus? You better watch yourself." And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. Like you better watch yourself. So I kind of toyed around with that in my head. What if you did have to watch yourself, your own reflection? How do you evade that? How long can you evade that? Really, that's just inevitable. Eventually, your own reflection is going to be cast as something. What if you're constantly having to watch your back, and how do you go about your days? So I kind of spun off of that and said, I think I could develop this into a story. And it started out as kind of a short story, and I kind of worked it a little more. And I was like, this can probably be a novella. So kind of went from there. But that's kind of the origin of it.
I think origins of story, because like if you ever asked me to guess, obviously I never would have been like, oh, he was obviously listening to a Marilyn Manson song. But that brings up a great point. I was listening to Stephen Graham Jones talk about his book, My Heart is a Chainsaw.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about what kind of got the ball rolling on his mind thinking about the story originally, and was like, he was reading The Virgin Suicides and he liked the kind of style that it was told in. And so he was like, I could do this, but with murder or whatever. So obviously I'm getting that story a little bit wrong, but like no one would read My Heart is a Chainsaw and think, oh, obviously this is like echoes of The Virgin Suicide. So I love hearing like those kind of unexpected origin stories for story ideas.
Yeah.
Then did you have to dive in and do some research, or were you already kind of familiar with like that kind of base
No,
myth?
I was kind of familiar with the whole myth and everything, and just kind of played off of that. And, obviously there were some aspects of it, and I don't want to give anything away, but in the book I kind of modernized it, as to, what was happening to these people and everything. And, so I adapted it to the book a little bit. So not all that rings true with the original myth, but, I knew enough about it to where I could kind of, toy with that and go where I needed to go with it. But I always loved, when I was younger, Greek mythology and everything. So I always kind of gravitated toward that stuff. And so I enjoyed it.
Yeah. No, I think it was executed well. And then obviously was that the impulse for, so we haven't really talked about like much of the structure of the story, but it's a handful of college kids going on vacation in Greece. And that's kind of where everything goes down. So I'm assuming that the setting is based on, we're using this kind of story, so this is where it makes sense to go.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, and I picked Mykonos, and I don't know if that's historically accurate or, I did, and to be honest, I did do a little research on that, hey, where was this, where would this most likely take place? So I kind of felt like that was a good location. But yeah, so that was kind of my justification for having it there. They kind of needed to be where that whole myth, that whole legend originated. So obviously, they kind of stumble upon that location, and it kind of spins out of control from there.
And then, so the general idea is, all right, so I'm as worried about spoilers as you want to be. So like, however gently we need to dance around this, but the general idea is like they come across this kind of wild story about this, if you can find this pool, like this, it's almost like an urban legend that something happened here a long time ago, and they want to see it because like it's a cool thing that was like this crazy thing that happened in the past. So I'm assuming never thinking that any damage would come to them. And then they find the place, and the general idea is, like you were saying before, because of what went down, you have to avoid your shadow, or not your shadow, your reflection, or else you could, terrible things are going to happen to you. Right. I got that more or less correct.
Yeah, no.
So this leads to like, I'm interested to hear what feedback you've gotten about like, oh, this reminds me of this thing. This reminds me of this thing. Cause like now we're talking about, there's some like horror tropes that are either tangential or like that this kind of fits into, with like the whole idea of being marked for like an inescapable doom kind of thing, or like the clock's ticking, or like a being pursued by something kind of tirelessly. So is that something you're into? Because I feel like maybe the structure of the story made you make this decision, but like, is it something that you are a fan of in general?
It is. Yeah. So I personally, I relate it to Final Destination, probably first and foremost of anything. And I haven't gotten any feedback, honestly, from anybody saying, hey, this reminds me of X, Y, or Z. But when I've mentioned Final Destination, they're like, yeah, I do see that. That's kind of, to me, what it probably most closely relates to. That, as well as, maybe a mix of Candyman and Oculus. I'm thinking about films, specifically. I'm a child of cinema, so my mind always just goes straight to film. And honestly, when I was writing this, I was thinking cinemagraphically. Like I try to picture this as a movie as I'm writing it. So hey, fingers crossed, one day that'll actually happen. But yeah, so I would think probably Final Destination, kind of Candyman. That's kind of what.
Yeah, it's such an interesting like storytelling thing too, because like with Final Destination, they figure out, because of this, now this bad thing's going to happen to us, and it's like race against the clock to figure out, how do we stop it? How do we cheat the rules or whatever? The other one that comes to mind is It Follows, which kind of has a built-in escape kind of mechanism in it.
I've heard of the movie, and it's on my list that I have yet to see it. You are actually the second person to mention that. It Follows.
Yeah,
it just brought it.
And I will say,
I need to see it.
It's great, and it's like, I once you watch it, you'll be like, oh, I totally get why people see this, because like there's this creeping kind of unstoppable consequence. For the listeners or viewers, I will say that it's not like when I was reading the story, I was thinking, this is like this. It was when I was done reading the story that I was like, oh, these mechanics also kind of happen in these other types of stories. So like, I love that type of thing. So I don't want it to sound like, oh, he's writing this. It was like, he wrote this great story. It reminds me, there's also these other stories that do that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally know what you mean. And even after writing it, I start finding similarities in it. Maybe it's stuff that resides in the subconscious, and I don't realize until I'm done. In another movie I haven't seen is Smile, but so Smile and It Follows. They're both on my list, but that's another one I think that probably kind of carries the same, sort of trope. I don't know. From what I haven't seen it, like I said, and from what I gather, is sort of this curse that follows these people. You see the smile, you die. So,
yeah, I want to see that one, but it's like I got to just see it when it's daytime or something.
Yeah, yeah, it's
a. How about The Ring?
Yes, 7 days.
Because The Ring is. Like you literally watch something and then like the bad thing is going to happen. So I would say it's kind of like it's in good, this story is in good company with like some of the really scariest shit out there. So I think that's a good thing for you.
Yeah, and that's something just terrifying. A ticking clock is placed on you, and it's just seemingly inescapable. I I love that sort of thing. I mean, it really amps up the tension. It provides a good story. So
Yeah.
I'll let the readers, I'll let the readers be the judge. But hopefully I pulled it off.
It's, no, I think you very much did. And there's something about that. The other one that just came to mind is a movie called Velvet Buzzsaw, which I'm sure not many people have seen. It came out on Netflix, but like basically like in that one, a bunch of like art, it's like in the art world, and like someone discovers this guy dies and they discover he had all these paintings, and then these paintings become like super popular and sell for a lot of money. And anybody who profits off of this dead guy's paintings like dies horribly. So it's like there's like a transgression and a consequence kind of situation in that one too. So I really love that setup though.
Yeah.
So, and you pull it off well with just one of the creepiest moments where it's toward the very beginning, and they make it to this place, and like things are starting to feel a little off or weird or not right. And one of the characters just says, "It smiled." And oh man, like that one got me. I was like, because it's one of those situations where like as a reader, you can see it, and like it's that whole like reality isn't acting the way it's supposed to, and like there's that feeling of total vulnerability. If you can't trust reality, like what chance do you have of like being safe? I think is kind of the thing. Yeah. I really liked the creepiness of the type of story that this ends up being. All right. I'm going to indulge myself with this next question because it was a dumb idea that I had. I was talking to my girlfriend about this book, and I was like, well, what about this? And I'm like, that's dumb though. And she's like, no, that's a great question. So the general idea of the story is, I'll tell you a little story. So I read this book, and then, a couple days later or whatever, I was watching, random TV show with my girlfriend, and it happened to be What We Do in the Shadows. So it's a vampire story.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, wait, they don't have reflections. So like, did you see where I'm going with this? Did that ever occur to you that like, that would be a cheat to get around the reflection thing or?
Yeah, that's true. The worlds would have to merge for vampires to it. But I guess if Narcissus exists, vampires exist. They're all kind of folklore and mythology and everything. So it's a high possibility. They'd have to go seek out a vampire and get infected by a vampire. Yeah.
But that's true. Well, and then my mind went to like, if I were the one writing this and somehow that became part of the story.
Yeah.
Like I would find a way to make that a worse outcome than like, than like if they just tried to, avoid the. So that was my dumb little mental indulgence.
Yeah, no, like, man, it's definitely something I hadn't even thought about.
I'm glad I'm hopefully the first one to think of that. So
you're the first, man. I haven't even thought about that one. So yeah, that's fine.
So cool. And then I have to indulge myself a little bit. And I don't know. Have you ever read the book Raw Shark Texts?
I haven't. I think you mentioned that the other day in our email correspondence, and I had to look it up. And now it's on my list to read. So no, I haven't read it though, so I'm not familiar.
So I'm going to diverge a little bit, and I'm not trying to I'm not trying to talk about a bunch of other stuff, but this is like my nerd indulgence moment.
No, you're good. Yeah.
This book here, and then every book on this shelf right here for people who are watching the video is a copy of that book. And basically, really quickly. The part of the book that matters to me is that the main character is one of the big parts of the book is that he's being pursued by a conceptual shark. So it's not an actual physical shark in water. It's like a conceptual shark. And it eats memories, and if it
Huh.
eats enough memories, you're basically that's it for you. And so part of the book takes place on an island in Greece, and without spoiling too much of it, like there was something in your book that reminded me of this in a way where I was like, if this is an intentional reference, that's fucking like stellar. If it's not an intentional reference, like I'm just fanboying too hard. So
Yeah, it wasn't intentional, but now I need to go read the book, and yeah, I'll come back and say, "Yeah,
I
just
know.
kidding. It was intentional." Yeah, yeah. So, no, I wasn't familiar with the book when you mentioned it, but yeah, looking it up, I was like, this one's going on my list. But no, that's cool though.
Well, I feel like I'm just giving you a bunch of homework, and
No,
that's
you're
not.
good. You're good.
So in writing this, this is the first thing I'm reading from you. Um, and I believe this is you've had short stories published in the past, but this is your first novella / novel situation. Okay. What, can we just kind of dial it back and talk about like how you got started writing and stuff, or things that,
Yeah.
are writing inspirations for you maybe?
So, man, I started writing, at an early age, when I was young, and I would write these little mini books, with stapled notebook paper and stuff, and read them to my aunt when she'd stop by and visit. And, it's so, I just wrote for fun. I loved it. I would enter the school writing competitions, and I won a few and everything, and yeah, so I mean, it started really young. I would have teachers say, this isn't a brag session. I'm not bragging, but teachers would actually accuse me of plagiarism. Oh, did you copy if it was poetry or whatever? Be honest. Did you in front of the class? I'm like, come on now, did you copy this? From, be honest, be honest. I'm like, no, I didn't really. I just really enjoyed writing. So, and I did well, from an early age. Later on, in life, it kind of fell by the wayside because this is kind of a lesson and kind of giving into the naysayers, and you read these articles and other people's gripe sessions about, oh, it doesn't pay enough money, can't do anything with writing, it's not a worthwhile pursuit, and it kind of got to me, and after a while I just set it aside. It's not worth bothering with. Adulting kind of took over, and it fell away. And maybe probably about 8 years ago I started toying around with a book. So Narcissus is actually technically my third book I've written. So I've written two novels um, that are right now unpublished. So the first one, that in this one I'm speaking of, it was called Stimulus. Back in like 2015, started writing it. It took me a couple years, and I had some representation for that, but it ended up going into a rewrite, and I just kind of burn out on it, and set it aside for a sort of a sci-fi horror novel that I really had been wanting to write. So I gained new representation, and actually I'm finalizing edits on that one now. So hopefully, with any luck, I'll find a home for that in the near future. Um, I'm kind of, I don't even know if I'm getting to the point of the question right now, but I'm just giving you sort of a rundown on everything here. But yeah, Narcissus, I wrote that one relatively quickly, over a couple months, and I just really enjoyed it and got into it, got in, got out. And so, yeah, I was kind of pleased with the way it came out. So, and I'm glad it's been so well received. But yeah, I guess back to the original question, where does my inspiration come from? When I was younger, I read a lot of, and still, like Michael Crichton and stuff like that. I love like, plausible science fiction, grounded science fiction and things. And the more people read of my other writing, they'll see I like to incorporate a lot of that, like science and technology and plausible horrors. I mean, to me, there's nothing more horrific than the plausible. Could it really happen? It's not just
Yeah.
Spooky monsters that could never exist in real life. I mean, these are things out there, dealing with genetics or whatever, military dominance or whatever it might be, just things that could actually happen. To me, that's the scariest stuff. And with my new novel that'll be coming out, you'll see a little more of that kind of introduced. But and that one's called Body of Water. But yeah, so anyway, just a little bit about me and my background. Yeah.
Was there kind of a moment that, because you said, adulting took over, it kind of fell away. Was there some kind of like catalyst to get back into it, or was it just like you missed it or something like that? What pushed you to get back on the horse?
I missed it. For a while, I pursued professional aspirations, with my primary career, which is in cybersecurity and stuff. And, I enjoy it well enough as a job. But when you're chasing certain positions just for the money or whatever, and, you're not really using your true passions or your creative talents, and that's just something you're inclined to, or you're drawn toward, or you gravitate more toward, eventually gravity takes over and pulls you the rest of the way in that direction. I think that's kind of what happened with me. I kind of circled back around to that and said, this is my true calling, that this is where I really feel life leading me. This is where I'm going to find the most fulfillment is in writing. So, ideally someday I'd love to do it full time, as a full-time job.
Yeah.
And until then, it'll be something on the sidelines that I'll do, and we'll see how well it goes. But yeah, and I think that's kind of at the root of it, just it's not all about, the fast money and stuff like that. And I think it just takes, maturing a bit in life and coming to that realization and saying, I'm going to do what I love. I'm going to chase my dreams, and I'm going to stick to my creative passions. And yep. So
I can't think of a better reason to do it, my friend, than that. And I will tell you, I feel like not enough people find a way to satisfy that part of them. So I don't do podcasting for a living. Like, I'm a corporate trainer. So on my day job, I'm teaching people how to like sell and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And this is a way of satisfying a passion that I don't have as a career. And it is infinitely important. Like, there was a gap of about a year and a half where I wasn't doing it, where it was like I felt an absence of something. So I absolutely identify with what you were saying about that. And like, there's not a set path on how to get where, like, as an author, people are going to have success in a million different ways. So
right.
As long as you're writing and satisfying yourself, I think that's like satisfying that passion that's inside of you. I think that's the important part.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes down to, what fills your cup. I don't think a lot of people are fortunate enough to say their day job fills their cup completely. So, it's to be able to scratch that itch and find that satisfying thing in life. That's something truly special. I feel fortunate to have that. And, hopefully one day, I can make more of it. It'll become a more full-time thing. But for the time being, I'm really enjoying the journey, and I'll take it as it comes.
So following that thought a little bit further, on my side, I most of the people that are important in my life now are people I met through doing a podcast about books. So let's talk about community. You're writing and everything. I've seen a lot of people talking about this book. So it's obvious that there's like people in the community that are supporting your work. Do you have like contemporaries that you're friends with and stuff? Or have you been in the community for a while, or is this something that you're all kind of new to?
So I've been in the community for a little while, mostly on Twitter, and I'm kind of a groupie now. Just like the fly on the horror writers wall. There's some authors that have been really cool, and just open and communicating, most times, and very supportive. Some of those, and I don't claim to know that. I'm not like tight friends with them or anything. I'd love to be someday, but in just general correspondence and, receiving guidance, like Philip Fracassi and Jonathan Jans and Sadie Hartman. She's been awesome. I talked to her here and there, and she's been, of course, she's just a staple in the horror community, and she's been wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
And she's, I can't say enough wonderful things about her. I'm trying to think, man, I don't want to leave anybody out. Everybody's just super supportive, just on a daily basis on there. Ross Jeffrey, Clay McLeod Chapman, both of them blurbed the book. Laurel Hightower, she blurbed it, and I met Johnny Compton just over Twitter, correspondence recently, and he was kind enough to blurb the book. So it's a great community, and I'm always, meeting new people and making new friends. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just settled when I'm going to be having Sadie on this podcast last night for her book that she wrote, and
Yeah.
talking with Philip now. I'm talking with Philip now about his upcoming book, having him on here. You're in great hands with the people that you've mentioned so far, because I think, in general, those are pretty stellar people to have supporting you. But
Absolutely.
I've noticed that in general, the horror community seems to be more of like a very open, happy, welcoming, warm place than maybe other genre communities that I've seen. So even if you don't like strictly identify to a horror genre, if they feel like you're one of theirs, I feel like you're very well supported.
I feel the same way, and I've noticed that. Some other, for example, Sean Cosby, S.A. Cosby, from
Oh my
Black
God, yeah.
and Razor Blade Tears and everything. He hangs out in the community all the time, and he's it's like he's another horror author, and you know, and I think I don't know. He may have written some other horror, short stories and things. He's primarily crime, but he's one of us. Yeah, it's just like you said, and there's several others, I've noted in the community, just they hang out, they're part of the group. And the horror community, like you said, though, they're extremely supportive. More so, I don't know, maybe just because I've hung out in the horror community more so than thriller or sci-fi or anything. Maybe if I embedded myself more in those communities, I find a similar dynamic. But I really do think it is extra tight in the horror community. Everybody has everybody's backs. If you see
Yeah.
anybody get out of line in the horror community, watch out. Here comes the wave.
Yeah.
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 So,
They scramble to take care of problems.
yeah. So it's cool, man. It's definitely like a very family like, very super supportive dynamic going on there. So
Yeah. I was talking to Brian Keene a while back about I did a podcast with him about him and Michael Wilson from This Is Horror. We did an episode of a podcast where we talked about interviewing people. So like that was the topic, but in conversation, that dude was talking about how like kind of the high ups in the horror community, or the established people, or the people that had been there for a while, kind of like maybe informally take the new people under their wing. Like there's like kind of an unspoken mentorship, like mentor mentee relationship, or like a kind of thing where like, hey, you're new. Let's make sure that, what's going on. You've got support and everything. So I'd never heard of that before, but Keen was saying that. And like that dude is just, a pillar in the community. So I was never heard that about any other genre. So yeah, I've always just heard and seen the best things in this community. So
yeah, definitely. Without a doubt.
It's a nice place to be.
It is. Yeah.
A friendly neighborhood.
Speaking of Brian Keene, yeah, I'm hoping to get a seat maybe at AuthorCon, and I don't know if you've been to that in Williamsburg, the Scares That Care AuthorCon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so so it brought that to mind.
Yeah, I'm a Midwest guy, so that's always an East Coast thing, right?
It is. It's in Williamsburg, which is just a stone's throw away from where I'm in Chesapeake, Virginia. So that's about 45 minutes to an hour away from me. So yeah, now that I actually have a book to take there, so maybe I can get a seat at the table. Yeah.
That would be he's a great dude, and it seems like he really cares about fostering talent and stuff like that. So I hope you do, because it seems like that's another. And then there's a librarian in Illinois. Her name's Becky Spradford. You might have heard from her. She does like, her Twitter is RA for all, but she's like basically like the horror reviewer for like book list and stuff like that. And so she does tons of horror reviews, and I think she has some sort of thing to do with the Scares That Care thing as well. So she would be another person who like, and she's super supportive of the like the horror community and like individual authors and stuff. She's a crazy ally for getting as much exposure for horror authors as possible. So she's like one of the best resources as far as like, you know, being an author, I think that you could possibly have, like her, Sadie, all the people we've talked about. I know we're getting off on a crazy
Yeah,
tangent.
no, you're good. You're good. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And
Yeah,
honestly, I don't know her. I'll look her up though after this, and
yeah.
so yeah, sounds like another great contact in the community.
Oh, Becky's fantastic. I met her in StokerCon 2017. I was there for my previous podcast, and she was one of the people I interviewed. And I was bumping into people. You know, it was on the Queen Mary boat and everything, and I was bumping into people, and they're like, "Oh, who are you interviewing?" And when I'd said her name, they're like, "Oh, you're talking to the librarian," and like they got all excited and everything. So she's the librarian. But
The
I
library.
think in the horror world, she actually has, I think, the title of horror maven. So like she's like the established horror aficionado
Oh wow.
of libraries, and you know, so it's kind of
That's cool.
but she's an awesome person. So
Yeah,
anyway, the community is great. And I'm happy to hear that you're getting the support that you are. But like, man, yeah, I think that it's a great group of people to be involved with.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, so back to the book. I always worry about just spoiling things. So there's obviously places I don't want to go talking about that. I will say in general that I feel like it's not a spoiler to say that I really enjoyed the ending, because like I feel like oftentimes in a book, when the writer builds their story, they structure a story, it
Hmm.
kind of leads to an inevitable outcome.
Hmm.
And whether the ending kind of matches where I feel the story's going or not, um, can have an impact on how I feel about it. But I feel like the way that you ended the story was very good. It was very good. I guess, yeah, it's tough to say without spoiling stuff, but
It's tough. Yeah,
yeah.
we could try to dance around
Was
it.
there here's
I'll
here's
say
where
this. I was hoping I
okay.
didn't let anybody down. I was kind of curious about that. I've gotten such positive feedback so far. I feel a little better. I can breathe a breath of relief now, because I was like, I don't know how this will be received. Will it be like,
Yeah.
yep, I didn't want that kind of reaction. Is that it? Yeah, but so yeah, no, it's
So
good
far
to
so
hear
good.
that. Yeah. And I'm sure I'll
So
get some things. There's a few turds in the mix, in the reviews always, that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but predominantly
totally.
feedback's been positive. So
Well, one of the things I saw you mention on social media was how something that's important to you is like getting it all right. So what you just said
yeah,
about like trying not to like, so when you said that, I had finished reading the book already. So I was like trying to think in my head, did he miss anything? Were there any inconsistencies? I can't think of any. So
if there weren't,
you
don't
said
tell
that
me.
that was
I can't handle
no.
it.
Yeah, because it's out there. There's no taking it back, right? So what's that about? Like, is that something that grows from frustration from other stories, or is it just like a personal like expectation of yourself?
I think it's just an expectation of myself. So I have ADHD. A part of that is a sort of hyper focus on a subject. So if I get into it, I've got to know everything about it, and I'll obsess over it until I know everything there is to know about it. And so I kind of apply that. And when we're talking about what compels me to write, I feel like it's sort of a way to channel that. Um, so I think it probably stems from that. It has to be right.
Yeah,
If especially, if I'm getting into the science or technology of something, it has to make sense. It has to be right. Um, I've had people tell me before, like, nobody ever left a movie, saying, oh, it wasn't that great, but at least there weren't any plot holes. That might be an extreme way of looking at it, but there can't be any plot holes to me. That's not acceptable. There can't be, like, the film I watched, Tenet, and I couldn't help but sitting through the entire thing saying, but no, that can't be, because they said this, and like, and I will pick something to death, and
yeah.
so yeah, and with my writing, I'm kind of just the same way. I can't let it lie without it making sense. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just a high expectation of myself, and when I'm reading other, honestly, I'm more picky, more particular about books. I'm sorry, movies than I am books. So if I'm reading somebody's book, for whatever reason, I'm not as particular about it. I'm particular about my own work, but other authors' work, I won't take it apart. But a film, maybe it's something with the visual aspect of it. I'll rip it
Mhm.
up. Like I can't deal with the plot holes. So yeah.
I had that problem with the movie Joker, the Joaquin Phoenix movie Joker, where that was very structurally told. Where the only time that something happened, it meant this, and so like throughout the movie, I can't remember exactly. It's been a long time since I've been angry about this. But like throughout the movie, I'm using that as like my guide of like this is real, this is like a hallucination or an imagination or something. Like because of this scene in the beginning, that implied that this type of thing was in his imagination. It wasn't real. And
Mm.
then it happened again the same way. And I was like, okay, they established a rule. When this type of thing is happening, it's not real. It's his imagination. And then the ending doesn't honor that. And it just fucking drove me nuts. I was like, I cannot respect this movie because like,
And it makes you mad.
if,
It's like, how did this
yeah,
make
it's
it?
like,
There,
it's
how
like
many
you
people
told
signed
me
off
what
on
to think.
this?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's like you told me what to think, and then you betrayed me
Yeah.
following that rule. Like, yeah, it's very. So I definitely know what you're saying about that. But now with you holding yourself accountable in your own writing, is there like a process that you go through to like hold yourself accountable? Like, what does that look like? Do you reread a bunch? Do you have like
And
people read and feedback?
I don't really have any beta readers or anything. I just kind of, even my wife, I don't like her to read it, until it's final. Something about that. I don't know if it's a
Yeah.
superstition type of thing, but
Hmm.
it's got to be. Maybe it's a part of that perfectionistic side of myself, with my writing. It's got to be right. It's got to be right for anybody who looks at it. So I think I just read it to death. I'll just reread and reread, and inevitably
And like
something.
question yourself.
Yeah, inevitably something will pass through the net, and and I'll have to capture it later. But there's always
Yeah.
a change to be made. But yeah, I think I don't know if there's a real process more than just reading it to death and just trying to capture everything.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It sounded like it was something that was very internal, and you validated that that's kind of the case. Like it's like you just kind
Yeah,
of almost obsess over it.
yeah, I do. And some people, and more power to them. When they write something, they say, good enough," and then they move on. Just, I'll pick it to death to the point of
Yeah.
absurdity. So sometimes I just have to sit back and say, "It's done. It's done." Okay. I'll
Well,
forget it.
to your credit, I think you wrote a really solid story.
Thank you.
And
Appreciate that.
so, and I, in reflection, thinking about it back, because I'm a very particular person. Like I will, in the middle of watching a TV show, I'll be like, I'll pause it and I'll say to my girlfriend, "Do you know why that person's wearing that shirt?"
Yeah.
And I'll be like, it's because they're trying to portray this type of characteristic without actually going into a whole thing. Like I break apart stories all the time. So I'm not saying that like I'm not saying I'm the ultimate filter, but like if it got through me,
Yeah.
then it's
That's good.
probably a good indication.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
um,
That does. And so let me ask you though, when you do this stuff in movies, does your wife get irritated with you? Does she say, "Can you just watch the movie"? Can you? Because I catch that. She's like, "Can you just stop and let's just watch the movie and enjoy the movie?"
yeah, sometimes like I feel like when I get that way for myself, it's like a passion that is not often seen from me. So it's kind of amusing or like cool.
Yeah.
Other times it's just like it's annoying. It's like just try and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Final thought about the book. And I'm prefacing this could be a very valid answer to this is that you just want someone to have a fun reading experience. But like,
Yeah.
was there kind of any overall goal of like of what you'd like people to walk away with from this? Or again, fun reading experience is 100% a valid response to that.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's all it was. I just wanted it to be a fun reading experience and something a little bit original. Yeah, I think that's about it. Just
Good.
I wanted it to
Good.
be entertaining, nothing too heavy, and people can take away from it what they will. There are no right answers or wrong answers, and yeah. So
I definitely feel like it's got a cinematic quality to it. So,
yeah,
like you said, you imagine it a little bit that way. Obviously, I would say that it's a pretty cinematically adaptable thing. But there's also just like there's a type of story that, because it reads that way, it's more enjoyable. So like that's kind of a recommendation to anybody listening to this, is like, if you like that type of thing that carries itself very cinematically, like I think this story would satisfy that kind of reader.
yeah, and if so, that's awesome because that's the way I wrote it. Like I could just see it playing in my head as I was writing it. So that's kind of what I was going for. Hopefully, others see it that way, and yeah,
Yeah,
like
very
I said
visual.
earlier,
Yeah.
with any luck, that'll happen one day, and it'll be cool. Yeah.
um Sorry, were you going to say something more?
No, 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 you're good.
Okay. So you mentioned before a book that like you'd written two other books, and one of them sounds like it's ready. Is that being shopped around, or is that something that's already being planned somewhere?
Not yet, not yet. So that's going through edits between my agent and myself. So I recently landed her representation, just maybe a month or two ago, honestly. So this is going through the first round of edits with her recommendations on how to kind of shape it up. Some slight changes we can make. So I'm going through that right now, and I'd say more about the book, but I don't really want to give the plot up because it's a totally I've never seen it in film or television, so I don't really want to give the concept up yet. But I'm pretty excited about it, and I hope everybody else is as well when this finally comes out. But no, it's not been shot yet, and I'm looking forward to when we can, and hopefully sooner rather than later. But yeah, I think it'll
That's
be really
awesome.
yeah.
That's one of the things, as a podcaster who interviews people, that was always like, kind of felt guilty doing, is like, you're here to talk about the thing that's being released now, and I'm like, what's next? So it's always kind of like a dummy asking that question, but like,
Yeah, no,
for me, I read the thing, so now I want another thing. So that's where
yeah,
that's
no, and
coming from.
it's totally fine. Man, I've got plenty of short
Yeah.
stories. Maybe there will be a collection coming out at some point. I've published a few others, as you mentioned, in a couple magazines and anthology from Flame Tree recently. So if anybody, for any of the listeners, if they want to check that out, that's the compelling science fiction anthology that was just released.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say in December, and that includes my story "Season of Change," which it's a bit different. That one is actually still being shot for adaptation, as well as another story that's currently unpublished, with considerable interest in both of those. So nothing surefire yet, but definitely exciting. Some of the levels of interest that have been expressed toward those. So if anybody's interested, Season of Change is in that anthology, compelling science fiction. So
Very cool.
yeah, and I'll share that with you if
100%,
you're interested in reading it. So.
totally.
Oh, and something else you mentioned earlier about it reminded me, the book you were recommending, talking about the shark, eating memories and everything, and until there's nothing left of the individual. It
Yep.
reminds me of another story I wrote that might be up your alley, so I'll shoot that your way. But
Oh, absolutely. I'm happy to.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm happy to get those inside things that other people don't
Yeah,
have access to.
Yeah, so not many people have read that story, and I was like, yeah, that kind of rings a bell. It sounds similar to that one. It's actually similar to I don't know if you've read Blake Crouch, any of his stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I've read Dark Matter and Recursion and Upgrade.
Okay, yeah, because I read Dark Matter and I had started Recursion, but I wrote this story I was talking about actually prior to reading Recursion, and when I started reading Recursion, I was like, this is kind of similar. If somebody didn't know better, they might think I kind of piggybacked off of this. So I was a little bummed. I was like, oh man, I thought it was completely original. But yeah, so anyway, kind of cool. But
nice. So outside of your writing career, the other thing that you had talked about was like working in cybersecurity. So I'm really interested in this. And before we started recording, I was talking about how I'd spoken to Alma Katsu a little bit, who worked in intelligence and
Mm-hmm.
now has a great career in historical horror.
Mm-hmm.
I thought of another example and I can't remember it now. But anyway, uh, that's a whole different thing, but it sounds like that's been a career for a long time. So where does that come from? Like, did you study that in school and stuff and then go into a career in that, or what's your story with that?
Yeah, so that was sort of an evolution that took place. And I did 4 years in the U.S. Air Force from 2000 2004. And at that time, I trained, as an IT specialist. So I worked as a systems administrator and systems engineer for, I guess, about 10 years or so before a colleague of mine had transitioned over into cybersecurity, and specifically cybersecurity risk management for the Department of Defense. So we don't do like the technical end, implementing the intrusion detection systems and things like that, but we go in as essentially cybersecurity compliance auditors, and we abide by a framework of controls and regulations, policies, procedures uh, that the government has to adhere to remain operational and process, from unclassified to top secret information on these networks. So it's all about, ensuring these compliance mandates are in place to remain operational and, with a minimal amount of risk. So that's really what I do up till today. So, yeah, I work for the U.S. Navy. I'm a government employee, and yeah, so that's it's kind of the gist of it. I work more, so I guess you could say the more administrative side of cybersecurity. So, with regard to these compliance and regulations and policies and everything. So I help draft the policies and kind of vet them for approval. Brief leadership on risk metrics, associated with these different systems. And when I say systems, this could be, from standard business systems to ship systems, industrial control systems that control, fuel and oil and stuff like that. So those really are that's a big part of, what I specialize in at this particular command. I work at Military Sea Lift Command. Um, that's a big deal these days, is, because these industrial control systems, when they were first built years ago, cybersecurity wasn't even a thing. It wasn't even thought of. It's an afterthought now, where all these new technologies they're attempting to bolt these things onto these archaic systems, and they just don't quite fit. And so you've got a lot of systems that, I mean, it's common knowledge. I'm not divulging any secrets here by talking about it. They're just relatively protected. So we're doing our best to kind of nail these things down and operate with a minimal degree of risk. So, yeah. And as we kind of learn more about cybersecurity and advance forward, they're starting to develop. They bake them into the development process of these systems. So it's more at the forefront of concept and design than it used to be. So, yeah. I know it's very exciting stuff, but that's my job. That's my day to day.
Well, it sounds like it's important and very necessary for the security of our country. So I will always be, a supporter of that. Kind of randomly, so there's a podcast that I listen to called Cyber Work, and their whole thing is like the guy that's the host interviews people in like that realm about stuff, and I'd never understand any of it, but it's a person I know the host kind of through someone. Mm-hmm. So he was listening to my podcast. I started listening to him, but I was recently listening to something where the person was talking about how like a lot of the safety and stuff, like you were saying, kind of came after the fact, and now people are working more on like the stuff that's made is like made with security built in instead of like kind of being a reaction. Is that kind of like, I know I said it very ham-handedly, but it made me think of this.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So like that sounds like it's kind of a newer thing, at least on like a domestic level. But it sounded really important. Like, and it sounded like it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, we've had this stuff for a long time. And back in the day, like the
Hmm.
threats that exist now couldn't even be conceived of then, but now we're trying to
Yes.
like be more proactive or at least not reactive. Is that the case?
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Well, that's it sounds to a person who doesn't understand it at all. It sounds like it's like a really important thing that we definitely need. So
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
It's definitely needed, and it's not the most exciting field, for anybody who's not a nerd about this sort of thing. But yeah, it's a lot of legal and regulatory requirements and stuff, and so um, yeah, it's some tedious reading and research. But at the end of the day, it's well worth it. It's just definitely necessary because as you were just covering, things used to be more reactive rather than proactive. And unfortunately, we're starting to shift more in the proactive direction. So the more we do that, the better off we'll be. And so,
Yeah.
and
Well,
sort of delving into some more recent discussions, as far as like AI is concerned, artificial intelligence, and the discourse recently,
yeah.
regarding writing, and how it's being leveraged. Chat GPT and GPT-4 and stuff is being leveraged toward writing novels and stories and stuff. And publishers have had issues with submissions being generated by AI and submitted, for consideration and
Yeah.
stuff. So, I feel like, and I don't know if I'm going to catch backlash from the community for this, but I'm not advocating for that at all. I think that's absurd. But that's to a degree that's misappropriation of the utility. I think it's getting a bad rap kind of because of that sort of thing happening. But I think there's a lot of positive uses for AI towards cybersecurity, because I know the it's got pluses and minuses. I know it's going to be a new threat vector. It's going to be a tool that's going to be leveraged toward developing advanced viruses that morph, to remain undetectable, much as a biological virus would. And so, I think to be
Right.
at the forefront and get ahead of that misuse of that technology, I think we need to adopt ways to use it to our advantage, to develop tools to counter that stuff. And so, to me, I'd love to find ways to start integrating that into government defense solutions uh, with cybersecurity.
Use the most advanced tools like to your
Yeah,
advantage. Yeah. Like,
absolutely. And I think a lot of people are shying
um,
away from it because they're scared of it. They think, oh, Skynet, and stuff like that. And
yep.
it's like, um, yeah. So there's
Here.
some scary
So
stuff. There is some scary stuff with it, and I do think Skynet. When I'm reading articles
yeah.
and watching videos on this stuff, and it's pretty freaky. Some of the things they're doing. But I think there's some promise there.
Well, that podcast that I mentioned before, Cyberwork, that I listened to one where the person who talked a lot about like Chat GPT like things, and the positive side that they spun was, let's say I have to write, I have to write something, and I have to use like these 5 different articles or pieces of information to reference,
Hmm.
using like a Chat GPT type of thing to summarize those
Yes.
5 things, and then taking that information and synthesizing it into the thing that I write is a time saver, because I'm not going through and summarizing all 5 of those things and then using that information. I'm using the machine to get to the point so that I can get to my point quicker. So like like they kind of did say, um, eventually what will play out most likely is we're going to find good use cases that are going to outweigh, somebody trying to write a novel using it
Yeah.
and then just like gunking up the system. So
Yeah.
they're also going to build in ways to identify, to fingerprint stuff like that, so that
Hmm.
it's easier to identify and like deal with than maybe what we have right now. But yeah, I've seen there was a spike of published publications that were like, AI generated submissions are just out of control right now. So I got to imagine that if you're a publisher right now, it's something where it's like, this is a new headache I didn't have 6 months ago.
Yeah, I can only imagine, being on that end, and I know actually Alan is shortwave. He's going to be speaking through a virtual conference at StokerCon about this very subject. So I'll be looking forward to listening in on that, and for everybody else's awareness if they're interested in that sort of thing. they can tune into
Yeah.
that. But yeah, so I've seen like Clark's World. They had to shut their submissions down for a while. With that specific message up there saying due to the influx of AI, generated submissions, we had to shut down, the
Yep.
submission window for now while we sort through these. And so that's I can imagine, the headaches that's causing on their end. I can also
Yeah.
imagine the majority of those submissions aren't very good. So I can't imagine AI writing a very compelling story. It's probably pretty rudimentary. Um, Probably
But then you
nonsensical.
just develop AI that identifies it, and then you use that to weed
Yeah,
out the BS, and then
yeah,
and then
yeah.
we're back to square one. So,
Right. So, yeah, but all
um,
kidding aside, I can definitely see that happening. Something that goes in and intelligently sifts through these things. Based on
yep.
pattern recognition and stuff like that, and how this stuff is written. So,
Yeah, if you know how something's coded, you know the type of
mm,
thing it's going to output, and then
yeah,
based on that, you can
yeah,
program something to identify that. I'm guessing.
yep,
I know I'm being overly simple, and it's totally not something that I have any knowledge of, but
yeah.
that's kind of the
No, I
idea
mean,
of
but
it.
it's true. It's true. There's no telling where any of this stuff will go. I was telling my wife the other night. I said I'm waiting for somebody to develop a tool that predicts, the stock market, based on historical performance,
Yeah,
predict the future trajectory of stocks, and it's coming. I know it's coming. You're going to start seeing this in the news.
yep.
So people
And then it's
cheating
like
us.
total control. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So back to your job and your work. So the first thing that I think of when you were talking about how, so there's a lot of emerging technologies. There's a lot of new stuff all the time. It has to take a lot of learning on your part. So that's the first part of my observation. The second part is, how do you have time to do fun stuff like read?
Oh man, so I read at night. I get in a few pages before I fall asleep in bed.
Yeah.
I'm not a voracious reader like a lot of people in the community. They put me to shame, but I read when I can. And honestly, it is at night. As I'm laying in bed. I'm ashamed to say I've never read The Stand, and I'm reading that right now. So that's a book I'm reading. I'm also reading
Yeah.
Jurassic Park. I've as much as I love Crichton, I've never read Jurassic Park, so I picked that one up, and I'm really enjoying it. So I'm reading both those books now. But so here and there, I
Yeah.
fit it in. I'm no Sadie Hartman or Stephen King or anybody just throwing these things back. So, but I do what I can. Yeah.
Sadie reads like 150 books a year, and that's just
I don't get it. I don't get how
mind-boggling.
it's possible, but
Yeah. Well, I talked to Cassandra Kaw recently,
Mhm.
and for their upcoming book, The Salt Grows Heavy.
Yeah.
One of the things that they said that I thought was great was like, and I'm not going to get the quote right, but essentially more or less the idea was, it's okay to not know everything, to like not have experienced everything, to not have done everything. And especially with books, like I learned early on as a book reviewer that like 9 times out of 10, when I'm interviewing someone, they're going to be like, did you read this? And my answer is going to be no, because there's so much that there's no way that you can have done it all. So like,
Yeah,
it's a
that makes me
big
feel
weight
better.
off your shoulder. What's
Yeah.
that?
I said that makes me feel better because I'm finding myself doing that probably 9 times out of 10, and I'm thinking I haven't read that. Everybody's like, oh, yeah, I feel like Don.
Nobody nobody should feel bad about the stuff they haven't read, because like there's no way to get it all. It's impossible. It's a
So
pursuit that no one has perfected. You can read it. You could read 24 hours a day. You're never going to get to every. You're still going to answer no. So yeah, it's comforting to me that we all are in the same boat with that one.
yeah. So,
Before we wrap up, I'm just going to hit you with kind of one other thing. You mentioned a couple of things that you're reading now. We talked about the community and everything. Is there anything, either a book that you really love that you think people should check out, or something that you've heard about that you're looking forward to coming out soon that you'd want to talk about a little bit?
man, you put me on the spot. No, I'm joking.
I know.
So,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Honestly, a book that really stuck with me a while after I read it was Dark Matter. I really love that book, and I push that anytime I can. By Blake
Yeah.
Crouch.
Blake's in Chicago working on that TV show right now, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. I'll
It's
second
really,
that. That's a great fucking book.
yeah, yeah, and it's right up my alley too, because as I mentioned, I'm all about the plausible science and technology and the physics and stuff, theoretical physics in it. It's fascinating. So I really enjoyed it, as well as recursion. It's got a lot of that in there too.
Yeah.
But so as far as books, I'm really looking forward to Whale Fall by Daniel Krauss. I'm really looking forward to reading that one. So um, that's
Yeah, I've seen
probably
incredible reviews about
yeah,
that so
that's
far.
probably at the top of my list of books I'm looking forward to right now. That and All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby.
Yeah, Sean.
Really
Yeah,
enjoyed his prior work, and yep, so
he's a
those
great
two are
dude too. Like,
yeah,
yeah, both of those guys. I haven't met Daniel, but he'll be, if as long as nothing changes, joining me in a couple months for Whale Fall to talk about that. So
cool, yeah,
yeah,
good deal.
awesome. So I'm very excited about that myself. I have the burden of like you can't see it, but my wall in front of me has just post-its all over it with like books, authors, dates, and stuff like that. So I'm just thirstily looking at my wall, thinking like, oh, there's so much stuff I wish I was reading right now, and I
Yeah,
can't. I have to wait. So,
right, right,
but yeah, both of those very much looking forward to those.
yeah, man.
Um, well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for your time, and thanks for letting me be your first kind of experience as a podcast guest. So I really appreciate that. Hopefully, it was an okay experience for you.
Yeah, it was great. I really appreciate you having me on. Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to whatever comes next, because I really enjoyed Narcissus, and I think everybody is going to agree with me on that one. So,
I appreciate it.
yeah, thanks so much.
All right, man. Thank you.